Hey everybody, welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast. I'm Hector Mirai, and I'm going to be reading today a essay that will eventually go in Faith and Fandom Book 8. It's on Washington and leadership lessons from Hamilton. And before I go into reading that, I want to take a moment to thank our Patreons, our patrons that support Faith and Fandom financially. Zach Harris, Caleb Grimm, Jeanette Skaggs, Chris Poirier, Chris Cook, Jason Bullock, Christina Ray, Sarah Lewis, Rebecca Godlove, Adam Davis, Stephanie Schwann, and Corey Grant. Thank you so much for being just crazy, silly, generous blessings to what Faith and Fandom is doing. And if you have any desire to support Faith and Fandom on a financial basis with everything going on with websites and all that stuff, feel free to do that at patreon.com/faithandfandom. But going into this is a chapter. This is the rough draft, and it's posted up on the faithandfandom.org. But this will eventually probably be edited up a little bit and end up as a chapter in Book 8 as it comes. So, wrote a song about it, like to hear it, here it go. So before I even go any further, let me be very clear. I'm writing this specifically on the character of George Washington in the play of Hamilton, not the historical accuracy or actions of the real person. I know historical figures bring their own baggage, but this is just for the representation in the play. Also, I doubt the real George Washington could sing as well as Christopher Jackson. My first time watching Hamilton was on July 6, 2020, as was with many other Americans that hadn't made it to Broadway or the touring shows. We set up a projector in the driveway with my whole DJ rig for sound and watched it on my garage door as we were all camped out on lawn chairs. I was impressed and enjoying it right off the bat, but Christopher Jackson's portrayal of Washington really hit me in a good place. The poetic wisdom of this founding father figure spoke to me, and I've only watched the visual version of this production once. My family has had the soundtrack on repeat for days at a time. My family's doubled down on their enthusiasm, geeking out over Lynn's appearances in DuckTales, and the reason we own Leslie Odom Jr.'s Christmas album. But for me, it's always come back to Washington. His entrance commanded attention, but the line that hit me so surprisingly was, "Check it, can I be real a second? For just a millisecond, let down my guard and tell the people how I feel a second." That one caught my attention truly. That caught my attention to truly notice his character. But the wisdom of the show was constantly handed down through his role, as he was peppered in through the story. As Washington gives Hamilton the cautious tale of his early failures in leadership, and history has its eye on you, I felt too real the painful remembrance of failures and shortcomings doing damage to others. As Washington states, and y'all, I'm not going to sing this right now. That's going to come on my album later. Wink, wink. As Washington states, "I was younger than you are now when I was given my first command. I led my men straight into a massacre. I witnessed their deaths firsthand. I made every mistake and felt the shame rise in me. And even now I lie awake knowing history has its eye on me." As a director of ministry for years in various capacities, there is this incredible weight that comes with the knowledge that you are responsible for the well-being of others. That your success and failure doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone you have the opportunity or responsibility to be over. It's truly a blessing, but it's frightening how much damage one leader in the wrong attitude, heart, or mindset can do. In Ezekiel 34, there's this frightening passage that I imagine could be sung in tandem with Washington's words to Hamilton. Verse 1 begins, "The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat curds, clothe yourselves with wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd, and when they were scattered, They became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered all over the mountains, and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched for them or looked for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and so has been plundered, and has become food for the wild animals. And because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than for my flock, therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. That is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending flocks so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. I would never want to be the type of leader that brings damage to the people I'm over. But sadly, I know I have. I know I've been a poor shepherd at times. I know there are seasons of my life that this passage from Ezekiel accurately and frighteningly describes. But that's part of the growth process, is recognizing where you fail, moving forward, and also passing on your painfully earned wisdom to those you can. I hope the congregation I have the honor of pastoring today wouldn't feel like I'm leading them into a massacre, and that God would be pleased with my heart and intentions. But I have to keep an eye on myself in this manner. This is why James points out so bluntly that this isn't for everyone. In James 3, verse 1, we see this warning. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. I don't want to be the leadership equivalent of Charles Lee. Washington continues on the song to tell Hamilton that not everything is within his control, but the eyes of the world are watching over what he does. Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story. I know that we can win. I know that greatness lies in you. But remember, from here on in, history has its eyes on you. This was true for Hamilton, and while it is true for all of us in a sense, for history to truly take note of us, we have to do something incredibly amazing or incredibly horrible. The odds of most of us being more than a footnote in history is very small. But that's the thing. We have more than history with our eyes on us as believers. We have God and all of heaven intently gazing on all our actions. Hebrews 12 paints that picture. And as Washington encouraged Hamilton, we are encouraged to know that we are in view and to push forward. Hebrews 12 verse 1 begins, Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Washington gave great cautious wisdom for moving forward. He also gave great wisdom in stepping back. And one last time, Washington surprises Hamilton by telling him that he is stepping down as president, to Hamilton's shock and dismay. He is modeling humility, empathy, and wisdom in a place where it would be so easy for someone to cling to power. Going to be going on back and forth a good bit between Washington and Hamilton here. Sorry. If you know the song, you know who says it anyway. Washington states, and then we'll teach them how to say goodbye. To say goodbye, you and I. Hamilton states, Mr. President, they will say you're weak. Washington replies, no, they will see we're strong. Hamilton says, your position is so unique. So Washington replies, so I'll use it to move them along. Hamilton states, questions, why do you have to say goodbye? And Washington replies, if I say goodbye, the nation learns to move on. It outlives me when I'm gone. In this instance, Washington displayed that power, even in service, wasn't meant to be clung to. Even as King George stated it in I Know Him, they say George Washington's yielding his power and stepping away. Is that true? I wasn't aware that was something a person could do. So often people pursue power for the sake of power, and that almost always leads to destruction. Even among the disciples, they had this discussion. In Mark 10, we see that James and John decided they wanted to have power alongside Jesus, and presumably over the other 10 disciples. They had the gall to ask Jesus for power. What's even crazier is in Matthew's account of this story, they get their mom to ask Jesus for the favor instead. But beginning in verse 35, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. God stones on these guys. Verse 36, what do you want me to do for you? He asked. Verse 37, they replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in glory. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Verse 42 states, Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Every step of Jesus' example was a model of humility and giving up of power rather than holding on to it. From leaving heaven to be humbled in a manger to having a huge following before being abandoned at a cross. Real leadership doesn't hold on to power for the sake of power, but does what's best for others. And when you think your presence is automatically what's best for others, you're already holding on too tightly. As Paul tells the Philippian church, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. That's Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4. Looking out for what is best for others often requires sacrifice, service, and humility, and that is something that I think our world has drastically lost sight of. Washington also went on to actually quote scripture to Hamilton. Like the scripture says, everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. They'll be safe in the nation we've made. I want to sit under my own vine and fig tree, a moment alone in the shade, at home in this nation we've made, one last time. The scripture Washington is quoting is Micah 4:4. It is a prophetic scripture of the last days and states, everyone will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, for the Lord Almighty has spoken. Not just that our works will make us safe or at home, but the presence of God. But there is a beautiful notion that we will find that moment of rest. The two verses that precede that verse paint an even more beautiful picture. Verse 2 states, many nations will come and say, come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so we will walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between many peoples, and will settle disputes for strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. In the years that have followed since the Hamilton era and this singing Washington, we haven't exactly arrived at the time frame of fig trees and shade. Our country has seen some serious ugliness, and even on our best day, it's a far cry from what these scriptures illustrate. Because that kind of peace and unity can only be done by God and not man. The reality that the rest we hope for is something only God can provide, but thankfully it is something he offers us. In Matthew 11:28 through 30, it states, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I can't prescribe a path to fix our country in these few words, but I can be a reminder of the lessons that I see in Hamilton and Scripture. We're to be intentional with our individual leadership because it carries great responsibility. We are to share what we learn, including our failures. We have eyes on us, both now and eternally. Power isn't something we need to strive for and cling to, but rather put others first. We yearn for rest, and we find it in God. That is the essay for Hamilton and leadership. And again, you can find the textual version of it on faithandfandom.org in the blog section for book 8. And Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of all that Faith and Fandom does. And if you enjoy this, like, comment, share, rate, do all the things. But I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a great day.